Welcome. It's just gone 7 p.m, Thursday, 13th of June, and you're watching episode 136 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap providing insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this show, the sun is all things weather, is my guest, Hayden Walker. Hayden is the principal of the longest-serving professional Australian weather forecasting company, with a history spanning back 130 years, and it's synonymous with the names of Australian folklore: Clement Wagg, Indigo Jones. With a well-proven accuracy record of around 80%, Hayden has become known as Australia's most accurate long-range weather forecaster and has been successful in predicting many major weather events. He was the only long-range weather forecaster to predict the 2013 cyclone Oswald and its devastating impacts that brought much of its as 1,000 millimetres of heavy rain to some areas in Queensland and New South Wales. More recently, Hayden predicted the storm activity led to the 2022 Eastern Australian floods, which were one of the nation's worst recorded disasters, with a series of floods that occurred from late February to early May across the Wide Bay area, southeast Queensland, northern rivers, and areas of New South Wales as far down as Sydney. Welcome, Hayden.
Good evening, Bill. How are you?
Excellent, thanks. It's been nearly 2 years since we had you on last time. And maybe you can just correct my memory, but I think at that time you mentioned that we were going to continue in a La Nina pattern for a while, then go to a short El Nino, which wasn't going to last too long, and more neutral, then a chance of turning back to another La Nina. So where are we up to the cycle, and how do you think things are going in the prediction fields?
I think I haven't missed too much of a beat in relation to the long-range weather forecasting. The flood range has certainly turned up in certain areas of Queensland, southeast Queensland, New South Wales, definitely, and in the last couple of years. So I don't think I've missed too much of a beat in relation to the weather forecasting, and there's more to come. So, and as you know, I use sunspot activity and solar flares.
Well, it was quite interesting. I mean, we've got a lot of angry farmers out there from the predictions of the bomb towards the middle of last year, with the forecast going into summer. The long-range forecast that they provided or indicated was going to happen got many farmers into a bit of a panic, and they sold off stock because most people, it becomes quite expensive when you have to buy feed if you don't get the rain to have your own grasses and hay and that, and you've got to buy it. So a lot of people sort of down stocked, and a lot of people got aggro with that forecast when it was quite a good wet summer, basically, and the feed's been around in most places.
That's right, yes. And I said a lot of my clients, I said, I have rain on its way, end of October, beginning of November, things will change. And they certainly did. And I said to my clients, I said, hang on until then, because there will be a change. I mean, the other side of the fence is a lot of graziers, farmers, they lost thousands of dollars contemplating that, it'll be so dry. So that's why they sold a lot of their breeders, a lot of stock in relation to I suppose it just went like wildfire in relation to, we got to sell now, let's get rid of it. Next thing, all of a sudden it turned around and the rain turned up. So I was happy for myself being right, happy for my clients. So yeah, that's this is a very difficult time.
Even for you, some of your clients don't sometimes listen carefully enough and sort of do the wrong thing. Did you have some clients that sort of went 50?
Well, yeah, they sit on the fence. They sit on the fence in relation to, with the media, increasing or intensifying that there's going to be El Nino and dry conditions and drought conditions. They sort of wonder, like anything, which doesn't matter which way you go, if there's a lot of talk, in the sale yards and so forth, and they're saying, well, it's dry, and it was dry, particularly dry. And then to sort of think that, hang on, it's going to rain, it's probably found it very difficult. But at the same time, as I said to them, hang on, because as you know, with weather in Australia, with a click of a finger, it'll change overnight. It'll just rain. That's how it comes, because of the sun.
I suppose the other problem is too, you've got so many people out there. I mean, between the CSIRO, the Weather Bureau, the media, especially then you've got the ABC and other people who are trying to hype up problems with the weather, rather than sort of just stay neutral and just look at it and sort of take it in their own step. But there seems to be a lot of media outlets and that sort of grab onto any story that's sort of negative and sort of try to cause panic. So that would probably make it difficult for you sometimes, that you're sort of advising your clients, from your information, but they're hearing from all these different sources, counter stories and that. So I suppose even though they may be paying for your service, they also might be sort of, just taking a lot of noise in as well.
They certainly do. And then the fact of the matter is, a lot of people have come on board with weather forecasting. And this is the problem, because when Lennox, he was forecasting weather, my father, it was Lennox and the Weather Bureau. And then there was Devonshire and Mirandy, they came in a little bit later, but there was only two, and that was it. It was the Weather Bureau and Lennox. So there wasn't much competition. And as you say, now there's so many out there and so many copying each other. So if someone's wrong, it's just a domino effect, because they're just taking the reports from certain people and they're just putting it into their own mold, and therefore it's just crazy, because they're just copying and they're reporting and they're not forecasting like myself, like 12 months or 5 years in advance. They're just copying and saying, oh gee, there's a low pressure system coming through, everyone can see the low pressure system on the map, and next thing they go, oh look, we better do this. So yes, that's why some people get a little bit annoyed with weather forecasting, because of that fact that people are reporting rather than forecasting, and we see a lot more of it. And they're happy to put all the lovely diagrams up, the maps up, all this sort of thing, and think, wow, look at that. And next thing people say, oh, we won't pay for that. And therefore, they don't want to pay. They get the wrong results. If you pay, you get the right results.
The other thing is too, there's so many academics talking doom and gloom all the time, and every time there's a little bit of change in the dryness or wetness of our country, it becomes it's got to get worse. We might be having a wet weather event or period, and they say, oh, it's only going to get worse because of climate change, and the next time it's a bit warm and drier, well, it's only going to get worse. There is so many academics and organisations that just push these, drama queen type things on the public. So that would have to be another factor, and it must be annoying in regards to these people who should just be neutral, because they're not in the weather forecasting business, but they keep coming out with these plots. Things are going to get worse, drier, and things are going to get worse, wetter.
Yes, they like to push their own barrow, and that's what I was saying before. Like, there's complete difference in relation to how I forecast the weather and how other consortiums forecast the weather. Everyone's on El Nino, La Nina, whereby I just simply look at the sunspot activity. We've been, professing this activity in relation to sunspots and cycles and so forth for years and years. But everyone steers away from that, because I believe they don't understand it, and two, it's easier to, I suppose, push the barrow the other way.
But there's so many things that they can push on. Like there's the Gulf streams, and then there's the jet streams, and then there's the Indian Ocean meteor thing that turns around, and the ENSO, and it's just full of acronyms all the way through. And in different like Western Hemisphere, Eastern Hemisphere, North and South. So they have got a lot of ammunition to throw around and confound people. But you're not confused by any of that. You're not distracted by those sort of things, because they're just derivatives of what the sun's doing. Is that the sort of picture I'm getting?
Correct. That's correct. And the thing is, by having dipoles, having SAM, having ENSO, La Nina, El Nino, you complicate. You complicate the model. Whereas myself, I look at the sun, and whatever that sun does, and that's what will happen in relation to, we will react accordingly from what the sun's doing. When you put too many parameters in, you complicate it, and then you sort of throw your hands up in the air and you think, well, what is going to happen because of this?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is it's like climate stuff, and that you've got, these people got these supercomputers, but it's more like garbage in, you still get garbage out. So if you can't do all the parameters, like I don't think these complete the climate computers even can model on clouds and things like that. So they're just putting half-baked things in and telling us what they get out's going to be the future. You haven't got any access to a supercomputer, have you?
No. Once again, if I did, it'd just complicate everything, and I don't want that. Keep it simple, Bill. That's what I believe in. Keep it simple.
Okay. Well, I suppose it's simple having the sun as one major focus point, but what does the sun provide to you in regards to parameters, variance, and cycles, and all those sort of things that move not just into the weather, but also move the climate?
So, looking at the sun, when the sun is prolific with sunspot activity, we always get extreme weather. And when the sun goes into a dormant stage, which means there's minimal sunspot activity, the sun's pretty well nothing happening in relation to just a bare cover, so to speak, we get drought conditions. And we've experienced that for many years and many cycles. So when the sun's in a dormant stage, nothing's happening, and next slowly you start to see some sunspots happening. And the sunspots will start towards the top of the poles, the North Pole and the South Pole. So the sunspot will start there, and that is the indication of a new cycle or sunspot cycle starting. So at the moment, we're in sunspot cycle or solar cycle 25. So we're halfway through that cycle. So what happens during that period of time, the sunspots will slowly drop, and they start to drop towards the equator. And then when they get down to the equator, you know that the sunspot cycle is starting to near its end. So they're usually about 11.5 years in relation to sunspot cycles. It does vary. You cannot put a complete range on it in relation to a cycle. It's about approximately 11.5 years. So now we know what the sunspot's doing in relation to where the cycle is because of how the sunspots are forming. And also over that sunspot cycle, if you plot all those sunspots, you find over that, say, 11 years, 12 years, you'll see it has a butterfly effect. So if you can Google this, you can get the sunspot butterfly effect, where you can see all the sunspots for that particular cycle, and that'll indicate the strength of the cycle over that period of time. So now when we look at the sunspots, the sun really has to release its energy, the helium and hydrogen from the core. So therefore, there's a lot of energy internally and two conveyor belts in the sun. So therefore, this energy has to get to the surface because it's just screaming out to get out because of the hydrogen and helium reacting together. And then they come out on the sun's surface as sunspot activity or magnetic field or magnetic loops and so forth. So the sunspot will look black to us because it's cooler than the rest of the sun. And then that sunspot can be like a pinprick. It could be like a 1 cent piece. It could be like the Indian Delta system, different configurations completely. But depending on the sunspot, if it's an alpha, beta, gamma, or delta, will dictate in relation to how strong that sunspot activity is. And then when that sunspot activity has that alpha, beta, gamma, delta, it'll go to a category of, say, A, B, C, M, and X. X is the highest category in relation to the most prolific, in relation to it'll have the effect on the Earth's weather. So we have the sunspots on the sun's surface, and then with so much energy, this magnetic field, you might as well say, it erupts, or the sunspot erupts like a bomb going off, so to speak, and it'll erupt, and it goes up into the sun's atmosphere. And if it's strong enough, it will leave the sun's atmosphere as a coronal mass ejection, and it'll get caught up in the solar wind. And once that magnetic field, or plasma, however you want to call it, hits that solar wind, the solar wind then heads towards Earth, especially if the sunspot is right in the middle of the sun. It is geo-effective, and therefore it comes straight towards the Earth. Now, sometimes they may vary the sunspot with the solar wind. It may just glance the Earth. But if a geomagnetic field is heading straight for the Earth and strong enough, it'll pop its the solar wind will hit the Earth's magnetic field. So the two magnetic fields react and will pop into the north and south poles of the Earth, because that's the weakest area, and that's where the current lines go through into the North Pole. And therefore, it'll change the barometric pressure. It'll react. So therefore, let's say we have a sunspot outbreak. The solar wind travels at 1,000, 1,200 kilometers per second, wraps itself around the Earth, pops in through the North Pole, goes through the current lines, and then what will happen then is that we'll get a change of the barometric pressure. So if you have huge sunspot activity, that's why you see huge storm activity. Or then you start to see floods, because if there's a low pressure system sitting somewhere in the Coral Sea, that sunspot and solar wind will influence as a catalyst to the electrons and protons of that low pressure system.
Okay, that sounds complicated to a degree, but
well, it's just a matter of the sun. If it's strong enough with sunspot activity, it hits the Earth's atmosphere and it changes the barometric pressure. That's pretty well in a nutshell. So high sunspot activity will give us low pressure systems or severe storms and flooding. Low sunspot activity will give us dormant period drought conditions.
When this activity happens, does it matter so much where we are, whether we're in a daytime situation where we're facing the sun, or in a nighttime and night, or it has nothing to do where we are physically located in orbit, our rotation? It's just a impact on the whole globe.
Well, let's have a think. Like sunspot activity, or the sunspots, is 600,000 kilometers in diameter, quite a large one. And the Earth's only about 12,800 anyway, roughly, approximately. So therefore, we're talking about a basketball as opposed to a marble. So it's very, 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 very contrast in size. So when that solar wind hits the Earth, it'll just wrap itself around the Earth, and it'll cause this rain change in relation to barometric pressure. But also at the same time, when you say about the 24 hours, the fact is that's why I go back into cycles then. So I'm looking at the sunspots, the sun, and then from there I look at past weather cycles, because those sunspots will tie in and couple with past weather records. And those weather records are based on the revolutions of the planets, which will vary anything between 11 to 165 years in cycles. So let's say, for instance, we're heading towards the end of 2024, say November. I know there's a lot of storm activity for Queensland for November. So I'm monitoring the sun and I'm saying, right, okay, here's an outburst of sunspot activity. These are what my records are saying. So therefore, yes, sunspot, tick, got that. My records, based on which cycle I'm using, I'm thinking, well, this is the one I'm using. So everything's going into plan. So therefore, the sunspot, the cycle, they're tying in together. So that's how I make my prediction.
But the information you've got is not some exclusive little thing you've got. This would be available to heaps and heaps of people if they wanted to know or look into it.
Oh, you possibly could, but the thing is, you need to know how to read the sun. That's the thing. That's the difference between, as I said before, forecasting the weather or reporting the weather. Which one do you want?
I'm just talking about all these other cycles you're talking about with the planets, and that would be, general information. Anyone could go back and see where we were, say, 1,000 years ago in our planetary cycle, and that it's not like some secret knowledge.
Oh no, you just got to use your grey matter, Bill. That's all.
But do they want to use grey matter? That's what I'm sort of getting about. I mean, this information is sort of just public information in regards to all this past history, but
yes.
not enough people are making it availing themselves of it.
Yes,
or ignoring
and also
it.
That's right. Yeah, so it's a simpler way of just putting these figures into a computer and saying that there's the result, done, finished. I can go home now. It's 4 o'clock Friday. See you later.
Right. Okay. With the the actual other elements of the sun, the different types of rays and the solar winds and the I think if you look at some of the data, they've got all these different graphs and that are occurring. Uh, are they just basically derived from the intensity of what's happening in regards to the sunspot?
That's right. Yes, how strong that sunspot activity is, and then you'll get your magnetic field. Then you'll get your plasma, your electrons, and your protons, and therefore, and you get filaments on the sun surface as well, all leading to this coronal mass ejection. That's the key. The coronal mass ejection lifts off from the sun, and therefore, once it lifts off, it gets into that solar wind. And that solar wind, that could only take 4-6 hours to reach the Earth's atmosphere and react. And maybe it could be delayed. And it's fascinating when you look at the sun, like that the auroras that we've experienced in the last few weeks. I mean, those coronal mass ejection, one was off. It was taking its time to head towards Earth. The next time, another one came in behind it and overtook it. So therefore, they joined together. So therefore, there was more of an impact. So this is fascinating, fascinating stuff in relation to, the sun, what it actually does. I mean, when you start looking at it and pulling it apart, you think this is just extraordinary. I mean, looking at sea temperatures and so forth, that's completely a different ball game. But this is absolutely spectacular what happens from the sun's surface.
And the thing is, it's real time. I mean, it's not waiting for the water to warm after a hot period or something. It's basically happening in real time, and really you're getting or you're forecasting it long term, but you're getting it also visually 4 or 5 hours ahead of when it's going to arrive to Earth.
That's right. It's done and dusted. It's on its way, and that's it. It doesn't say, "Oh, look, the current's going around the Pacific Ocean, the subcurrent with another current with this and that, and with the ice melting and so forth, to affect the temperature." The sun just goes bang. Here it's on its way, and look out. That's what it boils down to.
We've had a serious. I mean, floods seem to have been more prevalent in the recent years, the last 3 or 4. Of course, then we had little periods of drought, and then we had the big fire season of 2019-20. But it sort of beggars belief that we keep getting hit by these natural weather events and don't seem to learn from it and take care. I mean, if you look at Lismore, it's got a belting in the last 3 years or so. Bundaberg's got a fair belting as well. Why doesn't the powers that be, sort of get more on board with sort of looking at the sun? I mean, why do so many people disregard the sun as though it's just a constant or something like that, and it's all other things that are going on from a volcano explosion out at Tonga and that is affecting things or whatever? Why do so many people seem to dismiss the sun?
Well, it doesn't suit their model. And as I was saying before, they don't understand the effects of the sun and how to harness it, so to speak. It's easier to put it in a computer model and just leave it as that. And if they have a couple of wins here and there, they're fine. I mean, look at the devastation in December last year. I mean, one of my clients was up in Mossman, and I said, "Be very careful of this one in December." I said, "It's on its way through." And other thing is, Bill, the media. I mean, when it was out in the Coral Sea, it was a Category 5. It was
Oh,
just huge. It was going to annihilate the whole
oh,
coast. And that. And next thing, by the time it got here, it was about a category, I'd say a Category 1. They did bring it up to 2, but
yeah.
it wasn't the actual cyclone. Yes, there was some wind, yes, I know, but we had more wind than that in the Archerfield Airport that got hit with a pretty bad storm. But it was the flood rain. It was the rain, which I predicted to this big company up in Mossman. It was the flood rain. So this is another thing, like it was a Category 5. Everyone just went, whoops, here we go, just panic mode. And it was a Category, what, 1, 2? We call it 2. How's that sound? We call it a
That's
two,
that's
but
being
it
generous.
brought the heavy rain.
No, well, that was Jasper, and I have the
Yes.
same problem. Every cyclone had the same problem. You used to be able to go out and look at the marine buoys directly. You could actually click on them and see what was going on in the marine buoys. Now, with the bomb as a paid service, you can't access half the information you used to. But if you go, I always use the US Navy Joint Typhoon Watch or whatever it is, and that's just a bit more low key sort of thing. It's just a straight matter of fact what's going on. It's pretty dull, you might say, compared to the bomb story. But like you say, that was blown up as a Category 5. But no, I mean, anyone who looked at the information that was on the US Navy site, nowhere did it get up to that sort of thing. And when it was heading for us, yeah, it did go up to a 2, and I think when it was even 3 for a short time. But as it moved to the coast, I mean, no, you had to make it up that it went to a 2, because no way was that, it was, if it was 2, it might have been for 10 minutes or something like that. But as a wind event, it was nothing. But like you say, that trailing rain. And here's the rub. We got up the morning after the cyclone had hit and the front of the digital newspaper had, oh, the worst is over, we've all been spared. And within about 15 hours, the trailing rain came. And overnight, the people out at the beach, they could not get through to Cairns. It was already too late. They completely flooded, and cut off. So it's beggars belief that you can get the tick in the box to say the worst is over, and then 15 hours later, unbeknownst to us, comes this devastating rain.
That's right. Exactly. Yep, that's right. So there's a lot of confusion there, and the reporting is pretty appalling at sometimes.
Well, the other thing is, I think it doesn't help when they sort of, make a big drama of it before it's got here, rather than just being, just matter of point sort of thing, and just make people aware that it's coming and be prepared. But some of the drama that you get in the newspapers and on the news just is from another world, really. And what it does, it also starts to make a lot of people think, well, when next time they announce something, it's like, well, they've cried wolf before, so we don't do anything. So I think that's also a bad point in regards to over dramatising some of these events as they're coming in.
That's right. And the other thing, a lot of people foam in relation to, was it going to come down into the coastal districts lower along Queensland to the central and further to southeast? But you have to realise that there was a high sitting there. It wasn't going to come any further. Jasper wasn't going to go any further because there was a high sitting there, and the low will not go over the top of a high. The high will keep it out, and that's why it went to the north.
But not only that, being kept fairly stationary, it just means that you get an extra rain bomb in that location.
That's right. Yeah.
Until it exhausts itself. But we've had a few instances in the last few years where various cyclones mainly hit further south than here, but then they had a rain event that sort of carried, from sort of Rockhampton down to sort of middle of New South Wales. Some of those trailing rain events have been quite devastating.
That's right. And that's another thing, Bill, is that these low pressure systems and troughs, they can turn into a cyclone, or they could be, should be a Category 1 or a Category 2, but they're left alone, and it's the rain depression that makes all the damage. So, there's a fine line from when a cyclone or a low pressure system forms. There's a little bit of leeway there in relation to, is it a cyclone, is it a trough, or is it a low pressure system? So, I mean, it's got to form into a low pressure system, and then it's got to start the barometric pressure starts to drop, and then it gets into a cyclone. But there's a bit of grey area there in relation to how people are calling it in relation to, is it the grain depression? Well, yes, we know that. That's pretty easy enough. It's a trough, it's easy enough. But when it gets to a low, a tropical low, and not into a cyclone, that's a bit of a grey area also. So, that's another thing, like the extreme of a category 5, but also it's when it starts to turn. And sometimes we're a little bit slow on that one.
Yeah, well, I've seen them carry on a bit like Port Shots, and the barometric pressure at the centre is only 996 or something like that. Well, yeah, well, it's all right, it's a low pressure, but you got to get down to the 980s and below to sort of get into that panic mode of high winds and that. But it just beggars belief. Sometimes the low pressure system with 103 suddenly gets talked about forming into a cyclone. I mean, at 1003, it could go either way. Up a couple of isobars, hectopascals or lower. So it sort of beggars belief sometimes when they call it.
That's right. Yeah. And I think, it is in general terms, life in general, it's completely different how it was done.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should get back onto the sun in regards to what you see in your daily observations, and sort of and what sort of tools do you need, and what sort of websites are out there for people that besides yourself that sort of might be interested in what's going on with the sun, and maybe find out more information to interpret, so they can interpret what's going on, or the information that's coming, what it actually means.
That's right. Well, it's a fascinating concept in relation to science, the sun. And, like if people have the spare time, they can look at various sites, just type in sunspot activity or solar flares. And then obviously, they'll find some sites. I mean, spaceweather.com is a good site. It gives a bit of detail in relation to what's happening. And then they also explain what, the sunspots and so forth, what's happening. They go into a lot more detail in relation to what's happening. And there's solar ham. A lot of the radio users, they use solar ham. And it identifies what we were talking before about the class of the sunspot, and also the coronal mass ejections, how they explode from the sun and they get into that solar wind, and it's just a massive cloud or plasma that blows from the sun and hits the earth. There's Space Weather Live. There's another good website. So they're probably the three good ones. I mean, every country has them. Japan has them. Italy has them. Everyone. Europe has these web pages. UK. So pick your number. They're all going to be the same. They're all monitoring the sun. So
Same thing. But with all that sort of thing, why do climate scientists just ignore the sun? Like, I don't get it.
well, I suppose let's put it this way, they've invested a lot of money in El Nino, La Nina, and ENSO. So I don't think they want to change midstream. But then again, it's something to look at. But I just study the sun, and whatever changes, I make my forecasts accordingly.
Well, I suppose it's fortunate, because that way it leaves you in the field without too much opposition type thing, or other people trying to muscle on you on your long range forecast. Maybe we don't want to publicise it to them. Let them keep going the way they're going.
Well, that's right. They can have a go, but as I say, you need to understand it. And it's a bit more complicated than what we've discussed. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I just believe that like the pioneers of long-range weather forecasting with Clement Ragg and Inigo and my father Lennox. I mean, they only used to use a brass telescope. I mean, Lennox just had a refracting telescope, and I remember going to, as a kid, when we used to visit the relatives down in Sydney, he'd take his telescope and he'd pull up at 9 o'clock and he'd look at the sun he'd balance it on the roof of the car, and he'd just take 5 minutes and look what the sunspots were doing, and off we go again. So religiously, he'd look at the sun at 9 o'clock every morning, cloud permitting.
Yeah.
So that was the old way they did it. But nowadays, with all these, websites and computers and so forth, and the
And
internet, you
we've got
can grapple
satellites
these
up there.
sunspots easy.
Yeah,
Completely different back in those days.
yeah. Well, we've got satellites up there monitoring it all the time, and we're sending back information. A lot of that's sort of available to a lot of people. So, and I suppose there's probably a lot more that you can subscribe to and get information than you can for free on a lot of the public domains. Because usually there's a lot of things extra if you pay for it.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yeah. Very true. Yeah. Very true.
Okay, we might have a look at the sun, will we, on the solar ham?
Yeah, go on Solarham. That's a good site.
Okay, I'll just put the screen share on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm controlling it, not you, so you'll have to guide me. But
Yes.
this area down here you were talking about before is we want to play
Yeah,
that.
just play that. That'll be fine.
So what are we looking at here?
Well, you can see there that there's a coronal mass ejection to the right there exploding, and you can see the magnetic loops with the energy,
Yeah,
and that
that's all
leaves
it
the
is.
sun and it'll get into its atmosphere, and then there's those magnetic loops, quite prolific, quite stressful, a lot of energy in that into that white. And here, see there's clouds, see that burst? That's it.
Yeah.
That's the crux of it. We'll just replay that. Just go back to that last bit. Yeah, that's the crux of it there. That's the coronal mass ejection getting into the solar wind, and that, as you can see, that heads towards Earth.
Why is the colour changing? Is that something that's just like it goes
That's
to
it.
yellow?
Yeah, this is how they pick it up. That's right. Yeah, that depending on the strength and the
Is
electrons and protons
that
and the
filters of the
magnetic field and the
mediums?
plasma. So yeah, that's right. So that there, that's just about ready to leap. There we go. Just
I'll just
bang.
stop it. So we're seeing that that's the explosion of or leaving the surface.
That's it. And look, and see one of those little pinpricks down there to the right, that may be a little bit bigger. That'll be Earth. That's how colossal it is.
So, okay, so it's basically covered half the distance between the sun and the Earth in that explosion.
That's right. Yep. So
Okay.
it's spectacular. It's absolutely spectacular. The area it covers, and I was saying before, when you see that sun there, see how it's facing us. Just hold it there. Just hold it there, Bill, and
Yeah.
see how that sun.
So what we're looking at is straight on, and that's going to
That's
away
to the
from.
side of the sun. That's to the side of the sun.
Yeah.
Just backtrack a little bit, and we'll just stall it. We'll just stall that. There we go. So there you'll see a lot of energy on the sunspots, those white areas.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes
All
they're
over
coronal
here.
holes as well. Yep, they're
Yeah.
the
And
sunspot activity.
yeah.
And see in the middle of the sun. So the sunspots to the left hand side on the east there, they'll travel. They'll come onto the sun there because the sun rotates. So
Yeah.
they'll start on the side there, and then they'll rotate with the sun to the west. So as those sunspots travel across the sun's surface, they can go from 1 cent piece to a 50 cent piece. And when it gets keep coming along into the middle, that's where we're right in line with the Earth. That's right in line with the Earth,
Oh,
and that's a
yes.
direct hit. That's a
So
direct hit to the Earth.
what's the revolution speed of the sun?
The
Like it's
sun rotates 27 days. So it's about 13 and a half, 14 per front and back. So it's
okay.
about 27 days, close to the moon, but cycle, but yeah, 27 and a half days.
In regards to its size, how fast is
Sorry?
that compared to Earth spinning? Like we're only rotating, we're still rotating 360 degrees, but we're the
We're much smaller.
the distance around the Earth is only about 2,400 kilometers. So for the sun to move from one side to the other, that's
It
millions of
takes
miles
14,
across.
it takes 13 and a half to 14 days.
Yeah. So, but it's still spinning at a reasonable rate of rotation in kilometers per hour, I presume.
That's right. So when you come to the middle, that's geo-affected. It's right in line with the Earth. And when the sun goes when the sunspot goes a little bit further to the right, to the west, that's when it sort of gets out of the line of fire. We get out of the line of fire from the sun, and then that'll be a glance. It'll be a glance in
So,
relation to the
so
Earth.
it's quite fortunate we're only a pinprick because no, if these things could line up to us a lot more regularly facing us rather than going to the side or behind us, it would be pretty dramatic for the Earth. Like I say, are we fortunate that we are so small?
Probably, I don't know. I don't know. We're pretty small in relation to. We're safe, but we're pretty small. Yes, we probably are safer being smaller, but I don't know whether I'd put too much credence on that. The fact of the matter is that that's why we're where we are situated in the orbit of the planets and so forth, and that's probably just the right size and the right and far enough away from this impact. But also, I'd like to mention here that after heavy rain and floods, doesn't matter where it is throughout the world, you will find that we will experience a volcano or an earthquake happening after that rain because it will affect the pressure, which it is, it's pressure, and it will affect the pressure on the mantle. And therefore, that pressure will start to grate the plates, and therefore, that's why we get volcanoes, and that's why we get earthquakes. And I suppose if we cast back to when we had the floods in New South Wales and some in Queensland, we had the Mexican earthquake, we had a small earthquake up in your neck of the woods recently. But also, if we look back at the severe earthquake of Nepal back in 2015, we experienced a lot of heavy rain on the New South Wales coastline. So it's an indication straight away that the sunspots have caused the rain, but also with the pressure from that wrapping around the sun, it causes a pressure on the mantle, and the mantle gets energized and it needs to be released, and therefore the energy goes into the tectonic plates, therefore causing earthquakes and causing volcanoes. And it's done and it's not just one off, it's done for history. It's been historical events with rain, and there's a correlation between the three.
Although we could got some predictions like regards to increasing and decreasing sunspots, is there any way we can sort of also guess that when we were in the line of fire in regards to like if you go back to, I think it's in the 1800s and something, the Carrington event, and
Mhm.
Earth got a good dose, and that's because we were in the line of fire. But is there any way, besides just the number of activities, of also knowing that when we'll have be in the line of fire at the particular time, there's got to be activity on the sun that's got to be directly in front of us?
That's right. Well, it usually happens at the say solar 25, what we're going through now. We're just about in the middle of it at the peak. So henceforth, that's why we've received a fair bit of I suppose, sunspot activity at that peak, and therefore that's very, the frequency is very high. So therefore, that's when you need to be very careful, and that's what happens when it goes off to its dormant stage, which will be roughly 2031, around that 32, maybe 30, but anyway, around that period of time. That's when we'll go into a dormant stage. So it's when it gets into its heightened, it's part of its career, the solar 25 career, as it goes along, when it gets to its heightened establishment, we find that we'll get prolific earthquakes and volcanoes and heavy rain and so forth. Not all the time, but it does happen through the cycle, but certainly when it's at its peak.
Now that we've got so much electronics, computers, we've got the internet, we're all connected up. This sunspots events can actually it quite worries quite a few people in regards to if we get hit by another sort of Carrington event or whatever, that we might be knocked out and not be able to get internet, and we'll all shrivel up because we can't connect to our computer anymore because we're so tied to it. I mean, if someone took my computer away for a week, I don't know. Yeah, I might have withdrawals or something. So, how bad can it possibly be if we have a major sunspot event that actually interferes with our day-to-day life? And because computers run so many things from our electricity grid to basically our hospitals, our administration systems, our communications and that, how devastating could it possibly be if we did have a serious event that we got a direct hit?
Yes, that is a problem. That is a big problem, and I suppose if we go back to what's it, 1989, I think it was Quebec got wiped out. The power grid was down for 24, 48 hours. That was because of a massive solar outburst, and their grid system failed because of that. I mean, yes, it is a problem, but we have a pretty good blue line in the atmosphere that protects us. It does get under fire, and as I was saying before, probably we are far enough away that we've had many events. I mean, we're only very young in relation to the years that have gone by. I mean, these events have certainly happened in the past, but not with technology and computerization. So I suppose it's just a matter of we just need to be prepared, and that's the thing. We need to be prepared, just like before we're saying we need to be prepared about the categories of cyclones of 1 to 5. We need to be prepared about, well, this is why they're A, B, C, M, and X. So when there's an X, everyone starts to frown a little bit because that's the top of the tree in relation to the damaging effects. So we haven't experienced it just yet. But then again, like when those auroras came through, I did hear reports about people having, their reception on their phones and that sort of thing were interrupted. So maybe it's a telltale sign that it can impact it, and it certainly will if there's enough of those X-class flares, because that particular sunspot released 4, like within 2 or 3 days.
What about our assets outside our atmosphere and outside the Earth's magnetic field? Like we've got the space station up there, and we've got satellites and that, and everyone's talking about we're going to go to space and we're going to live on the moon and all those sort of things. Where we haven't got the protection that Earth gives us.
Well, that's
Are
right.
assets in space more prone to being knocked out of that from these events if they're in
Well,
direct?
it's a different ball game completely. I mean, I think that's, I don't know. I mean, why do we need to go to other planets to survive? We need to look after this one. That's the thing.
Oh, they're
You
telling
know, I
us we're
mean,
killing it.
yeah, no, well, that's another topic, isn't it?
Yeah. That's okay. In regards to the future of your long range forecasting, um, I would suspect your accuracy sort of guarantees with your current customers that you're going to have longevity, and hopefully, like the word of mouth in regards to those customers, keep you um, in a paid job type thing. Um, how do you see, or what sort of percentage do you think you need to sort of be considered reliable in long range forecasting? Because even though you're using the sun and you're getting reasonable results, do you think there's a limit to when people sort of you know take up the interest in your weather forecast or drop off? Like if you got to 90% or something like that, everyone pile on. But if you sort of drop below your 80, would it? Do you think there'd be a different reaction?
Well, I think probably the bottom line would be about 75%, I believe, to be, to have accuracy of around that 75% at the minimum. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, a good gauge is clients come back to you year after year. And also, like some years are terrific. I mean, you can't miss a beat, so to speak, because of that cycle. It ties in so well. And other years it gets a bit shaky. I mean, because like when you're having to predict, say, a variation rainfall, because say if you have a look at an area, there may be variation. I mean, some of that part of that area may only get 10 mil, and next thing, another part of that area, may get 50 mil. So therefore, these are the things in behind that you have to, as I was saying before, you have to use your grey matter. That when you have heavy rain, that's when you start to see all these people come out say, I can forecast the weather, because it's just heavy rain after heavy rain after heavy rain. It's no brainer, so to speak. But when it drops off, that's when you have to be very, very on the mark, because when you get into those dormant stages, because there's only a bit and everyone's looking for rain, everyone is looking for rain. That's when it becomes difficult.
Well, you'd have customers all over Australia, but I'm from West Australia, and I've got relations over there, and my sister and and my brother-in-law are in the lawn turf business, at growing it, and also providing instant lawns to households and sports fields and things like that. So rainfall is critical in regards to growing the grass, and then also, although they won't ever put grass on an area that isn't irrigated, hasn't got a sprinkler system, but what they also like is rain is a bonus. That's how they look at it. And you've got to look at if you look at West Australia for the last 12 months, it's been pretty ordinary in the way of rainfall. The East Coast, Lismore, up here and along the East Coast, been fairly good. How do you get demarcation lines from one area to the other to sort of, if you've got customers over in Perth, down the southwest in the wheat belt or something like that, or grazing areas, and then you've got people in the Murray-Darling Basin or up this way. The weather's different for across the whole country, sort of thing. So how can you get sort of provide a forecast over there and a forecast over there with and keep them all happy?
Well, you just go back into your cycles, and you have averages. Obviously, the averages are there for a reason, because if it's the average is very minimal, therefore there's lack of rainfall over the years, and so therefore you have so many statistics that you go through, and basically, like the main rainfall's obviously on the coast, like in Western Australia, it's southwest, and during the winter period, and then obviously the Kimberleys and surrounds for the summer season. So you establish of where the rainfall is, or we can get the averages, and you work out your forecasts accordingly. But that's why the average is the best. The average is the telltale sign of what your country looks like, which is pretty, it's obviously gives you the indication of how dry the place is. And then, with your forecast, you can either say it's above or below average. And the other thing, Bill, also is the concept of where the high and low pressure systems are formulating. Like this year through, I mean, we've had the heavy rain on the east coast of Australia. I mean, Victoria is going to receive more rainfall this month, next month, and it'll probably continue to the southern parts of Victoria even through to the spring, and also lower parts of South Australia and Western Australia. But the high pressure systems have been a problem, like the cyclones and so forth that we experience in Queensland. Those troughs and low pressure systems, or tropical lows, they've all been pretty high, or they've been kept out. They haven't come in. It's only been the heavy rainfall from the troughs coming through from the west that had an impact, and maybe a couple of low pressure systems like in Victoria on the border there of New South Wales. So it's the formulation of where these highs and lows, how they're reacting, and the highs are always a big problem in relation to the Australian weather, and that's what you have to watch.
The other thing you've got to watch with people in general too is coincidences. Like it's just amusing. Like my sister and brother-in-law actually came to Cairns early May, mid-May, and it's been drizzling here for ages, and everyone's got the whoops with it because we've had, it's been a fairly wet season, and it's also been, we'd be lucky if we get a day's break from sort of drizzle or something like that right up until mid-May, and it was interesting that my brother-in-law and sister came over in May, and they left Perth and it hadn't rained for months, and it's dry as a bone. 50-year-old gum trees, even in the suburbs, are dying. And he gets really angry when trees die, because all the councils have got to do is just take out a water truck, once every couple of weeks or whatever. Give any good gum tree 50 gallons, and it will survive these sort of periods. And it was just amusing that when they went home that very night, it started raining in Perth, and they got 38 mils. And so there's the coincidence. They took our rain from North Queensland and took it to Perth.
Maybe they should
But
travel.
all these sort of antidote, all these antidotes, cloud the issue sort of thing. But the other thing, do you think the problem with people is they've got very short memories or selective
yes.
memories in regards
Oh,
to
definitely.
weather?
Yes, definitely. They become complacent. Like, when there's a drought, people think it's never going to rain ever again. The next thing, Australian weather, with a click of a finger, you'll have flood rains, overnight. So, yes, I mean, people become complacent, definitely complacent. And in this day and age, there's so much more at hand in relation to websites and the news and so forth. I mean, it's on tap. Years ago, it wasn't on tap, and
But
people realised back then they were complacent and they were patient.
the other thing is too, so many of these people are doom and gloom masters. Like, it's always the worst scenarios that they're beating up all the time, and I suppose that what makes ordinary lay people start to worry in regards to, is there something going wrong with the world, or something about weather? Is a bit of CO2 causing the end of the earth sort of thing. How do you? I don't know. Do you think we can ever sort of get those people who have got a bit of the opportunity to be in the media to sort of calm down the conversation, or is it always got to be a beat up?
I think it's always going to be a beat up, Bill. I think they like to say it, but people thrive on it.
Yeah,
People thrive
there's
on it. You just got
no
to cut
like
through it.
bad news.
It's just you just got to cut through it. I mean, bad news is better to talk about and make conversation than, oh wow, good news. I mean, you look at the news. I always say to people, tell me something good today, will you?
Yeah, well, I suppose they used to have, at the end of the news, they used to have a little segment with a cat or a panda or something, to sort of, get people over the drama of the day, sort of thing. But as we go forward into the next cycle and that, where do you think we are? And is there any sort of weather patterns or that we're going to have a long cycle of, or we're going to have we got to have a series of chop and changes, or is it the fact that it's just going to be basically as it always was? It's just going to be cycles, and some are going to be a bit longer than the others, and some are going to be a bit shorter.
Some will be more volatile than others. That's right. Yeah, that's what will happen. But see, like I'm looking at further rain for Victoria, in the southwest Western Australia and South Australia for June, July. Tasmania, there's some heavy rains for Tasmania. And then Victoria, there's further rain through the spring to the southern parts of Victoria and also into the border of New South. And then it'll quieten down, and then we'll come back into our storm rains, where we'll find our storm rains will elevate probably in the southeast in October. Then it'll intensify for November and December, leading up into the Northern Territory and down to New South Wales. And then we start again next year, whereby there's heavy rain once again. March, April, May, there's heavy rain on the coastline, and there's heavy rain in the interior during April, Queensland. So, it'll be a mixed bag. It'll come and go. But we're still in the middle of the cycle 25. So therefore, we have a way to go till say 2030, roughly. I'm not going to say put a pinprick on that one, but yeah, it's that's when it starts to settle. That's when it starts to get towards the end of its cycle. But look, it's going to be a seesawing. It always is a seesawing effect. Some years are better than others, but in the next, from now through till next year, there's still further rain on its way. And in Western Australia, there's some cyclones, a couple of cyclones beginning of the year next year, which will give a fair bit of rain to the Western Australian interior. And then for us, there's a couple of cyclones in March for Queensland, and one at the end of this year in the Carpentaria, the Gulf. And so therefore, there's still activity around.
Do you think also there's too much emphasis on temperature? Like, I mean, yes, it does get hot and it does get cold and that, but like I say, one of the main things that we need, we always need a bit of sunshine, but we desperately always need water too. So do you think some of this weather type, climate type thing, emphasising the temperature, is really unnecessary worry for people? And more we've got to look at is, what the cycle is going to be for having a dry period and a wet period that's going to either help food production or hinder food production. What's your thoughts on the way they focus on temperature in particular?
Well, temperature affects people differently. I mean, you talk to 10 people, they'll give you a completely different answer. If it's, say, 14 degrees, I think it's 10 degrees. And then to other people, it's a difficult one, temperatures. And the other thing is, it's always that wind factor. The wind factor, it certainly escalates the temperature. I mean, without the wind factor, it's not too bad. Say in Brisbane, we might get down to 8 and 6s and down to 4 and 2. But that sneaky wind that comes through from Kosciuszko, that's the problem. But look, temperatures. Look, they're governed by the rain mainly in relation to if you've got rainfall, therefore you've got a blanket over the top of your avenue, so therefore the temperatures aren't too bad. But the humidity's
I
another thing,
suppose
isn't it?
I suppose the thing, I mean, Cairns Esplanade's a classic sort of thing. We always have tourists up here and that, and this time of year, you go, because my daughter just came up with her grandchildren, and they went down the Esplanade. I didn't bother going, sort of thing, but they were sort of just amazed with the people who are rugged up. They come up from Melbourne, and it's 16 degrees in the morning. And they're fine with that. They think that's sort of balmy, and they're just amused by the locals who've got parkas on, going for their walks down the Esplanade. So, like you say, temperature is different to so many people. It doesn't warrant the fuss that people carry on about it.
That's right. And you line 10 people up, they'll all give you a different answer. And that's how people are. Some acclimatise, some don't acclimatise. And there's the other factor, that it's been such a warm summer. It's continued through into autumn, and next thing, the click of a finger, the temperature drops, and everyone's not acclimatised. They're not ready for it, and therefore they say, "Oh, gee, it's cold," and really it's not. So if you have those temperatures for a week, everyone says, "Yeah, that's not too bad now." So it's people's perception.
One thing I have noticed, but in the last probably the 2 years in Cairns, just looking at the monthly figures, they got the average and then what it was for that actual month, and it is sort of showing that we haven't been having those minimums like we did for average against the average. The temperatures, especially the minimum temperature, is somewhere between 1 and some instance 2 degrees for the month over the average. So we're not getting those real cold mornings and things like that. So is there any reason for some areas might experience a sort of change in the average, that they don't have the range that they normally have?
Right.
We might get like in April or something, we might be around about, the average might be 29 down to about 24 or something like that. And then, but for these last 2 years, we've broken the higher temperatures slightly, but the minimum temperature has been anything up to 2 degrees higher. Is there any sort of patterns that happen, reasons that could happen?
Yeah, the temperatures have been a little bit above average because of the heat troughs in Western Australia. At the beginning of the year, Western Australia copped a hiding in relation to heat. I mean, it was like Marble Bar, that was up around 48, 49, and it's happened before, and it's from these heat troughs. These heat troughs are just stagnant. They just sit over the top, and then the wind collects from that, and it moves towards the east, and therefore it carries these hot temperatures through to the eastern side of Australia. And that's why you find that the average will go up and down, because whatever happens on the west will influence what's happening on the east, especially with temperatures, with these heat troughs. I mean, they're remarkable, the impact they have. They come across the desert, they come across over the desert, into the Carpentaria and onto the east coast, and that's when we finally get above average temperatures.
I suppose the other thing is too, I mean, you're looking at the sun, and it's a huge mass in regards to comparison to anything that's going on the Earth. But do we have events? I mean, like that Tonga volcanic eruption that launched a lot of seawater into the atmosphere, even up the stratosphere. Are those events insignificant compared to what the sun does, or do they have a short-term effect?
Well, they are insignificant to a certain extent, but they need to be much larger than that in relation to volcanoes erupting and the mass of, you know, matter in the atmosphere covering. That's when it starts, when it travels, thousands of kilometers and has a diameter or a radius, from one side to the other side. The radius drawn to be a diameter with, say, 1,000, 2,000 kilometers, whatever the case may be. That certainly starts to have an impact of many, many ages gone by in relation to records. But it's not big enough to affect us, the Tonga one, no. But yes, on a bigger scale, larger scale, yes, it will affect us.
I suppose the interesting thing is that because we've got satellites up there now, we see these events happening, and and it gets photographed and that, so it draws a lot of attention and gets a lot of play in the media. Whereas those events in the past, we only heard days or so later that something like that happened.
That's right. I mean, there's been so many events throughout the world over, in history that, some big storms have hit France, 100,000 people passed away because of the heavy rain and the floods and the catastrophe there. I mean, it's all happened in the past, it'll happen again in the future. It's just depending on how volatile that sun is. And that's what it comes back to.
What are you, for your paying customers, but I'm not giving too much away? How do you see us progressing over the next couple of years? And will there be any significant difference between the eastern seaboard and the western seaboard over the next couple of years?
In the short term, Victoria, by bottom half of South Australia and southwest of Western Australia, there's rainfall there. Continued, and there's some heavy rains for Tasmania. It'll be prolonged rainfall for Victoria into the spring, same as Tasmania. There's rainfall for New South Wales, the southern parts of New South Wales, and probably there's further rain on the eastern seaboard of New South Wales for July as well. And then it'll start to quieten a little bit. Maybe not so much Victoria and Tasmania, but they'll keep going. But it'll start to quieten on the east coast, and then it'll start to increase in October, and then build for November storm activity and December. So that's all good. And then that'll reach the Northern Territory, and then near Western Australia will see rainfall most of the state in the beginning of January next year, and then it'll kick off again for the Northern Territory, Queensland, New South, for heavy rainfall. The beginning there for Queensland and Northern Territory. February, I think there's some heavy rains on the coast of New South Wales, and there's March, April, May to get through. So there's a fair bit of activity in April. So, and then the year after, there's further rainfall at the beginning of, what's that make us up to 25, 26. There's some heavy rains at the beginning of the year for 26. So there's a bit on its way still, Bill. So yeah.
So when's the big drought coming and we'll never see rain to fill the dams again? When's that going to happen?
Yeah, well, it was supposed to happen in 2008 and 2009, wasn't it? Something like that. 2007, especially with all the desalination plants on the east coast of Australia, was supposed to be built. Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the knee-jerk reaction. Like, it'll rain. I mean, we go through these periods. I know it's hard and it's very difficult for many people, but that the people that have had the drought before, they've been through them before, and therefore they are ready for them because they've been through them. The fact is, it will rain again after a drought, and that's what happens. That's why we have cycles, and that's why we have averages.
But I mean, like I say, it's selective memory or short memory, but then it's also the failure of news organisations or BOM or that to actually pull out the history and say, well, it's not that dire. It's not unprecedented. Like, tell what weather events in the last 12 years or so have been unprecedented in regards to past history.
It's all happened before. It'll happen again. It's how it is. It's just its statistics are there. I mean, the Great Federation drought, early 1900s. Look at the amount of rainfall, over areas of Tully and so forth. Massive rainfall, and then there's dry conditions elsewhere in relation to the cycle.
But it's just is worrying about the number of times either a politician or some academic or the head of the CSRO still trots out there that word unprecedented. And then you can bet your bottom dollar within a couple of hours there's bloggers out there, telling all the past history from 1300 or something like that happened or whatever. So do you think maybe for weather forecasters and that unprecedented needs to be dropped out of their dictionary?
Oh, definitely. It's ridiculous. I mean, they haven't got a clue. The people that are using that word haven't got a clue for a start. So yeah, they're just trying to make a story. They're trying to capitalize on it, I suppose. I mean, rather than just drill down and say it is what it is, and that's it, we'll get out of it. But using the word unprecedented, like these rain bombs. I mean, rain bombs. Yeah, I don't really subscribe to that one either. But anyway, like you go back into history, Bill. Like the Thames froze for 6 weeks on multiple occasions throughout history. And that's how it is. We move on.
Well, Well, we wish there was less drama queens out there in the weather sphere.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look,
what else they got to do? That's the most talked about subject the weather, when it's going to rain.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. It's amazing that it is so topical, considering we've all experienced, and many of us have been around for several decades. Should know better in regards to shooting our mouths off and that about unprecedented and the worrywart stuff that goes on.
That's right. I mean, I could tell you heaps of stories in relation to, people that odds with myself. And, I suppose I'll tell you one story. There was a particular journalist, and he, this is many years ago, and I had a cyclone indicated, I think it was for February off Queensland. And he said, your cyclone hasn't turned up yet. And I said, I've got 3 days to go yet. Thank you very much. And I'll just wait. And I could just see a touch forming. And sure enough, it turned up, just on the end of February. And I thought, there you go. But he was, just those sorts of things. You just think, you're a target, but at the same time, you just got to believe in what you do.
The other thing is too, you can also get sort of familiar with what's been going on over the last few years. Like I've only lived in Cairns for 12 years, but the wet season seemed to have been sort of moving, further and further towards December, January on that. And then the first cyclone sometimes didn't hit to March, and the last ones are still coming in April. So I think for a lot of us who've been only here for about 12 years, Jasper was quite early. So again, it boils down to selective memory and short memory.
That's right. And complacency. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Everyone's different. Everyone perceives things differently.
Yeah, well, as long as it keeps you in a job and the income coming, I'm quite happy. We'll just wind up now. Do you want to sort of highlight things about your own service and that in regards to what you do and what you offer to your customers? And we'll also put up your website so people can go to it and that. But if you just want to give yourself a bit of a plug.
Thanks, Bill. Well, I've produced 12-month rainfall forecasts. So that gives an itemised account of rainfall for each month from, say, going from the 1st of July to the 30th of June next year. And it gives you an indication if the rainfall is going to be above or below average. And that includes rainfall dates. So that's a pretty handy tool to know what's ahead, for the 12 months. Some graziers will get longer than that because they want to specialise in relation to their property, what they should do with their property over the next, say, 5 years. So that's another handy tool in that respect because it gives a little bit further out, but also it gives them the heads up of what they should be doing on their properties, and also, obviously, the farmers. The other one is monthly reports. Excavation companies and so forth, they want a monthly report, and that'll be, say, like the whole of Queensland, giving an idea of where the lows and the troughs and all that sort of thing formulate, and it gives an idea of the temperatures as well. So, that's $220. That's what I charge for that one. And then there's obviously your commercial style of forecast, which are for air conditioning companies or insurance companies, or maybe retail of some sort, or the clothing industry. If it's going to be a wet winter, they'll go for clothes of the grey and black, and then therefore, if it's going to be a drier winter, well, they'll go for the colours. So it's interesting how the weather dictates sort of fashion as well. So, it's and horse racing, obviously. That's what Lennox was into a little bit when he had his race horses. But yeah, no. So, I do 12-month rainfall forecasts for, individuals, and also the monthly forecasts, which sort of coupled with that 12-month rainfall forecast, and it gives an indication of a handy tool of what's ahead and what's out there, so they can plan and prepare ahead.
Okay, then no worries. And I suppose the sun is a reliable tool. It's always,
It certainly is.
well, for many more of our generations, it will be there and dictating what's going to happen to our little world.
It certainly will. Exactly.
Okay, Hayden, thanks very much for your time tonight. It's been really appreciated. If you could just stay on the line, I'll just introduce next week's guest and
Sure.
the topic.
Thanks, Bill. Been a pleasure.
Thank you. If you enjoyed tonight's show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook page, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Joining me next week will be, I had a bit of a blank there, Paul Brown. Now, Paul was a member of Parliament in West Australia for the National Party. He's now, or always has been, a grazier, and it's a livestock business tied up with the live sheep industry in the main. And we've just gone through the situation where the Albanese government has decided to close down live sheep trade by 2027, and we look at the impact on farmers and what's going to happen to those sheep, whether it's the 4-year-old, because there's no real market for them other than the live sheep market. So it's a dilemma for farmers in regards to what they do with their stock at that 4-year point when they're no longer any good for wool production. So it's causing some consternation over there, and we'll look into that. Look at also the pushback that they're proposing against this legislation, and we'll also look at how small minority groups manage to get the ear of the government and dictate policy that affects thousands of people and millions and billions of dollars of income. So please join me again next week. Thank you.